Welcome back to the Ultraviolet Tide. We are continuing our conversation surrounding breast cancer and skin cancer awareness. And I thought, what better guest to join me than Paloma? Paloma, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. This has been months and months and months in the making. We first connected earlier this year at the Melanoma Research Alliance Patient Exchange Forum. And oh my gosh, hit it off immediately. I know we'll talk a little bit about this in the episode, but we kind of geeked out over all things design and fabric and really just hit things off. So I'm excited to continue that conversation.
Yeah, me too. That was, you had to tear us apart. I definitely am very interested in UPF fabrics.
Yes, and we'll talk a little bit about that in your evolution, but let me do a brief introduction so that the audience can get to know you a little bit better. So, Paloma Soledad is a three-time cancer survivor and the fashion designer and creative behind Krysalis Kourture. During her 5-year cancer journey, Paloma experienced numerous surgeries and significant side effects from the drug treatments. Wearing her normal wardrobe became increasingly difficult, which inspired her to create a new line of adaptive clothing. Her goal is to camouflage physical changes stylishly so you feel less like a patient and more like yourself. Like I mentioned, Paloma and I first connected earlier this year at the Melanoma Research Alliance Patient Exchange Forum. So, a huge shout out to the MRA. And we decided now is the perfect time to continue this conversation, especially since it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But Paloma, I do want to hand it over to you to give us some background, talk a little bit about who you are, and then we're going to really dive into Krysalis Kourture and all of your fantastic design work.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Yes, fashion designer. I grew up in Hawaii and I started sewing at the age of 3. My mom's a seamstress and has always been sewing her whole life. So she started with me as a baby on her lap and bought me my first antique hand crank sewing machine at the age of 4. So it's just in my blood, and I've always been kind of enjoying problem solving. My partner says I'm like a female MacGyver. So that's just been a string throughout my life that I've really enjoyed pulling upon through just work as well as the cancer journey. It really helped me there as well.
That was one of the things that I knew from our first conversation that we were going to get along because you started sewing really early and I started sewing at 5. You have me totally beat at 3, but it was like such a great outlet. Like, I feel like creativity wise, and I'm certainly not a fashion designer, but I do use fashion as a creative outlet, which is why I also am just super intrigued by Chrysalis Couture because I love brands that see a purpose. Like, it's not just clothing, it's clothing with a purpose and it has a mission and it has a vision. But before we even dive into all that, I know I'm getting way ahead of myself. I do want to talk about your early childhood because you mentioned growing up in Hawaii. And I'm curious how that childhood in Hawaii shaped you into the designer you are today.
Yeah, growing up in Hawaii was really interesting. Beautiful, beautiful, slow, definitely a different kind of upbringing than what a lot of people are used to. The island life, but also as a teenager, definitely island fever, right? I just wanted to be off the island instead of enjoying being on it. So that was a little bit of a pull. Just being surrounded by nature and beauty and scarcity, actually. It's 1980s, you're on an island, you have to um, be resourceful. And also being the child of 2 artists makes you extra resourceful. My dad used to make our furniture. My mom would make all of our clothing. It was all about making and art. So Hawaii was a beautiful experience. Just hiking, eating fruit off the trees, smelling the ginger flowers. And then the sun, of course, that takes us right into sun exposure, obviously.
Right. Right. It's not difficult to see how kind of like your childhood of having parents who are artists and kind of being surrounded by nature. You mentioned hiking and being outside. I mean, Hawaii is very similar to a lot of the stories I hear from individuals who grew up in Florida. They're like, we were just constantly outside, surrounded by nature, surrounded by the sun. And it was something we didn't even really think about. So it's really curious to see kind of how these stories have evolved as we have grown older and learned more about the sun. But going from childhood to 2009, you were awarded the Best Emerging Designer with your first collection at Portland Fashion Week. So, share a little bit more about your early career in fashion because we talked about this at the MRA conference and it was super fascinating.
Yeah, so I actually did not go to college for fashion design. I wanted to be a photographer, and I did that. I went to California Institute of the Arts back when you took pictures with negatives and developed them in a dark room.
Mm-hmm.
And that obviously has gone away. But it wasn't till it was actually the second semester of college when I realized it was the women in the photographs I wanted to dress rather than take the photographs myself. And I would have lost my scholarship if I had changed my major. So I just took some independent classes back then, and it was a lot of teaching myself. So getting jobs, my first love was really costumes. I wanted to be a costume designer, and I have been in Hollywood films. Obviously, the one that I'm most proud of was Coraline, the stop motion animated feature film, and learning how to make miniature clothing, little tiny shoes that were smaller than an inch. And I made all of Coraline's dolls, which were really small, tons of clothes, all of Forcible's clothes. And that really taught me. I never learned couture sewing officially, but that taught me the appreciation of miniature sewing. And that's when I was done with the film, I realized I wanted to be a fashion designer, and I started making one of a kind, extremely intricate corsetry and waist cinchers because they were more like a sculpture. And I was able to use lots of antique parts and pieces and crochet and all kinds of things that I found. So less of fast fashion type
Mm-hmm.
of fashion design. So I actually, it's interesting because all the good things in life kind of come as an accident, and when you look at them in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
And I was gonna go camping, and I got a bunch of newspaper, and I was flipping through the newspaper that I was going to be burning that weekend, and I saw a little tiny ad for Portland Fashion Week, and the tryouts were in 1 hour. So I had
Oh
to
my gosh.
gather all my stuff and run over there, and I showed them my work, and they said, if you can make all the clothing that goes with this corsetry in 1 month, you can be in our show. And
Oh
of
my
course
gosh.
I did. And I went over the top with hats and gloves and had the whole thing was dialed in. And I didn't realize it was a competition until I won. But
Oh my
that
gosh.
was the way I started the fashion
I
career.
love that. Oh, I love that so much. I completely agree with things in life. It's so funny. There's a quote, and I'm gonna completely misquote it, but it was like, if you planned out your life, it would end up being a quarter of what it actually would turn out to be, just because you can't imagine kind of some of the life paths and trajectories that your life takes until you're like, okay, we're here and this is working and I'm excited. And I know another thing in your life that you can't really plan for was in 2015. What seemingly started as a mole on the sole of your foot actually turned out to be a rare melanoma subtype, acral melanoma. So, can you share a little bit about your melanoma journey?
Yeah, actually, well, even growing up in Hawaii, I was into black and punk rock, and I kind of stayed out of the sun, which was lucky because I have lots of moles on my body and I've always had them removed, and I never really understood the weight of why was I having them removed. People say skin cancer, but until it happens to you or someone you love, you really don't understand what it means. So every time I had good insurance, I would go and take a whole bunch of moles off. And when I was in San Francisco prior 2012, I had gotten a mole removed on the sole of my foot, and I can just hear the echo of the doctor in my mind. She said, "Oops, I missed a spot. Don't worry if it grows back." And, it doesn't mean anything to me when she said that. And it grew back. And it grew back and it got big and it was smeary. And then it seemed like there was a wart coming out of it. So it's in the arch of my foot. And obviously it's never seen the sun. But my friend who's a cardiologist said, get your butt to the dermatologist and get that looked at. And I got him off of ZocDoc and he said, I can't, this is beyond me. Once he biopsied it and he sent me to somebody else, that guy said, this is beyond me. It's stage 3C, which is one step away from stage 4. And he sent me, it was so lucky that I was sent to Sloan Kettering. My first doctor was Dr. Coit, who was the one who brought the sentinel node procedure to Sloan Kettering. So instead of like they used to just take out all your nodes and you'd have to be swollen for the rest of your life, they inject a dye into this area and see what nodes are affected first. So yeah, that was my very first surgery, and it was a huge chunk of my foot. I didn't even think I had that much to take out.
Your case, a lot of people don't know about the rare melanoma subtypes as much. So I feel like any kind of information you can share on it is super helpful because, like you said, the bottoms of your feet really don't see the sun, and it is so rare and there isn't a lot of research about it. So I'm super curious, as you were going through and saying that, well, one doctor passed me off to the next. And then finally I was at, Sloan Kettering where I got the treatment planned that I needed. But how did it feel as you were kind of going through it, probably not knowing anyone else? Maybe you did, maybe another person who was going through a rare melanoma subtype, but I would imagine you probably didn't have a lot of people to turn to be like, all right, here's the case and here's treatments that work. You were kind of like, in a way, kind of a guinea pig for the treatment, honestly.
Yes, actually, I was a guinea pig. Eventually, I was a guinea pig. And I didn't search out other people. I didn't search out community. My partner would Google for me. I refused to Google because I didn't want to be affected by what other people experienced. I think all of our bodies are very different, and all of our journeys and how we're affected by the different treatments, as well as what kind of treatments are available to us. So I didn't want to just be scared. At first, I didn't even say the C word.
Yeah.
I didn't tell people, even though they took out about a 3-inch circle that was 1 inch deep to get all the margins on my foot, and then took out the lymph nodes. I was in bed for over a month. I called it Slurpee, and it was a vacuum that was attached to that hole. And by accident, they realized that it would regrow your flesh. So it would take out all of the fluid from the site, and in turn, your flesh would regrow. Amazing. I asked Dr. Coit, will my flesh just keep growing and growing? And he said, no, your body knows when to stop. And
Interesting.
It's things like that, yeah, that I'm just fascinated by. So instead of being scared or upset, I was just really into what was going on. And of course I had, the best doctors in the country or the world. So that also helps. That's something I have to say. But then they did the skin graft, and you have to sit for another month without tweaking that area. So I couldn't move my ankle or anything because the graft might not take. And, I watched the Game of Thrones. I had my little wheelie thing, and I would roll through the apartment and go, I'm the king of the north, So We had a blast. And that was actually when I designed my first line of women's wear, was in bed. So I made the
Oh my
most of it.
gosh.
I always go, yeah, but yeah, I didn't tell my family. My mom's husband had lung cancer and she was dealing with it wasn't going well. So I didn't want to stress her out. So I didn't tell her.
Right.
I didn't tell my friends, just some of the immediate people that I knew in New York were the only ones who knew. I wouldn't recommend that necessarily
Right.
because it was very lonely, and
Mhm.
I think in hindsight, it's nice to find community.
Right.
But that's just, I like to deal with things that are in front of me and then learn the lessons
Yeah. You have
looking
such a
back.
great attitude about it. And I know that the fact that you were in recovery and you used the time to start designing, I'm assuming what became Krysalis Couture, were you
Not yet.
using your not yet. Okay, so we weren't even there
Not
yet, but
using
you were
it.
using the
No.
time to still express creativity. Okay, so then where did Chrysalis Couture come into play? Because I know you used a lot of the inspiration and need that you saw while going through treatment to say, hold on, like, why is there no adaptive clothing? So, okay, how did we get from point A to point B then?
There was point A, B, and then C. So then a year later, it came back in my lymph nodes in my groin, and I had a bunch of those taken out. And I was introduced to Dr. Vincent Ladone, who was a laparoscopy doctor, which is the laparoscopy machine. It's just amazing. It can skin a grape and put it back on and sew it back up with little robots. So I met another incredible doctor. I think the people that you meet throughout this journey is really what makes it amazing as well.
Mhm.
So that happened, and then it came back again. So the third
Gosh.
time it was in my liver and lungs. And at that point, they couldn't take it out surgically. So they never said stage 4, but it was stage 4. And I was introduced to my new oncologist, Dr. Chapman, who is actually the one who introduced me to the Melanoma Research Alliance. So,
Oh my gosh. Small
yeah,
world. I love
it
that.
is a small world. So Dr. Chapman gave me my options. I was given the option to be on immunotherapy the first time, and they said it might not work. The cancer might not come back. It might be harmful on your quality of life. So I decided no. But then this time I was offered an immunotherapy trial, and they had just started using IPI and Nivo.
Mhm.
I don't know the full names. Levolumab, epilotomy, something like that. And so was on that trial. I had the 4 injections. The cancer stopped growing, which was amazing. It just froze and never grew again. But then at my upkeep injection of Nivo alone, and that was maybe 7 months into it, it made my immune response go totally crazy.
Mm. Interesting.
And
Okay.
it had a response that they hadn't seen before. So they didn't know what to do with it exactly, except for try to fix things after the fact. So what
Mhm.
happened was my lymph fluid wouldn't circulate through my body, and it was pooling everywhere. It pooled in the whites of my eyes, and I couldn't close my eyes, my face, my everything. I couldn't put my shoes on. I couldn't wear my regular clothes. It looked like I was 7 months pregnant. It filled my abdomen. It filled my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I was drowning in my own fluid. I had to sleep sitting up. I would be out of breath after walking a block. So that was an insane journey on its own, with tons of tubes. And I drained my lungs every day for 17 months, and I would take out
Wow.
a couple pints every day.
Jeez.
So
Oh my gosh.
I all of my all of the like good nutrients and everything I was pumping out of my body, so I wasn't able to
Mhm.
heal, and I had to find solutions, right? I was on a ton of steroids and all kinds of different drugs, and they were trying to figure out how to do it through drugs, but the drainage tubes, and then I got something called a Denver shunt, which would recycle it from my abdomen up into my jugular and then into my heart, was put in. And that actually happened after my emergency heart surgery. The fluid was filling up my heart sac, and if I hadn't gone into the emergency room within 24 hours, I would have been dead.
Holy
So
smokes.
that was lucky just on its own. I had, a pencil-sized tube coming out of my heart that would drain the
Mhm.
fluid. I had an arterial blood clot. I got lymphedema, neuropathy. IG issues, irritated skin, rashes. I was on so much steroids. I had hair growing out of my face. It was this whole gamut of experiences. And that's really what made me feel like I'm able to have a line of adaptive wear that can help people experiencing all kinds of things. So we'll wrap this up into adaptive wear, right? I like to call it medically versatile clothing,
Okay.
because when I was in that kind of later stage, I would be sewing my own garments. I would be making dressings for myself to help deal with the issues. And one day I looked up adaptive wear on the internet, and I realized that there wasn't anything that would encapsulate everything that I was dealing with, as well as chemo treatments,
Hmm.
getting scanned all the time. I was going to get a CT scan once a week at one point. So I was laying in bed before another surgery, and I just started obsessing, and I made a list mentally of all the things that I could solve with one garment. And why can't one garment be comfortable, fashionable, medically accessible, and kind of bridge the gap between loungewear, streetwear, and medical adaptive wear?
Yeah, I think you have. So, if anyone's watching on YouTube, you have one of your garments behind you, and it makes such a difference as you're going through treatment. And, there have been so many members of the actual skin cancer community that we've met who have also had to go through breast cancer treatment and were dealt, like, honestly, the worst hand possible. But one of the most important things for them was, I don't want to feel like not myself. And this is something you talk about on your website when you talk about Krysalis Couture, is that you want help patients regain a sense of normalcy. And for a lot of people, and you and I fall into this category, what's normal for us and what makes us feel good is our clothing, that it is accessible, but we still look good. And it's not just a pair of sweatpants, but it's something that makes you feel good, that's also accessible, excuse me. So, talk a little bit about your mission to help patients regain a sense of normalcy and how important that is to you.
Yeah, it's very important because, like I said, I couldn't wear my own clothing. I would stand in my closet and I would cry just to go to the doctors because everything was itchy or wouldn't fit me. So that really is being able to reclaim your identity, especially because you become a patient and your identity is patient. And who are you? Maybe you're a different person than you were before, but who are you now? And to be able to wear something that makes you feel comfortable and confident and maybe puts a little pep in your step. I love color therapy, so I like to do nice colors that make you feel inspired. Um, but yeah, I think losing yourself in the medical system is very
Mm.
easy. And then also,
Yeah.
like you said, sweatpants, feeling like comfort is so important, and then feeling ugly or just not realizing that there's another option. So I wanted to give people that option.
I love that. And I want you to talk a little bit about the garment that's behind you because it helps the audience understand what makes your garment so functional. So, can you talk about the strategic placement of how it is designed for ease of access?
Yeah, I actually didn't know you could see that. Can you see that?
I
This guy?
can. They'll be
Yeah.
able to see it on YouTube as well. So it's a great visual.
Okay, great. Well, so these are the little port windows that I've made. If you're not getting chemo or if you finished it, it just looks fashionable, but it's also modest. So a lot of times when you're getting chemo, you wear something really open, and I wanted to make it so it's just accessible, but it also, you can be proud of your port, and it's just like a little window for it. And then underneath there is an internal bralette, so you don't have to wear a bra, which sometimes can be uncomfortable, but also because none of my garments are now and will ever have metal or plastic, because
Mm-hmm.
I have been into so many CT scans, and to be able to walk right in and wear your own garments is extremely empowering. And they talk about skin anxiety, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like this is a secret weapon. I want to give
Yeah.
people that power back. It keeps you warm, makes you feel cozy to not wear one of those horrible, ill-fitting robes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really kind of the foundation of what my garments are. It's the accessibility, all the sleeves. So, like, the sleeves are big enough to where you can get your blood drawn or infusions, and all the garments kind of work together. So, if you're cold, you wear the waiting room hoodie, but it's like a little poncho so you can get into your port as well and then put it down. So, I'm wearing the waiting room hoodie now, which is in UPF fabric. So this is kind of for everyone. Hoods. I'm always disappointed with hoods. So extra big hood. You can hide from the sun if it's the UPF version, or you can take a nap in the waiting room.
There you go. Functional, practical.
Functional. If it's raining, your glasses don't get wet. If you have big hair, you can jam it in there. Yeah.
I love that okay, so when we first were talking, and I know I keep going back to this conversation, but in just like a 20-minute conversation, it was filled with so many goodies. And I remember you saying to me, I hate zippers. I'm like, okay, Paloma, tell me more. Why do you hate zippers? And you were talking to me about the fact of like, well, when you're actually going in for treatment, like you want to wear your own clothing and you don't want the metal, and it's not only cold against your skin, but it's just not practical in a treatment setting. And I was like, oh my gosh, she has literally thought about everything with this design. And it made me so excited. And another thing that made me excited is that when we were prepping for this interview, you told me that you're actually starting to transition from self-made, which you've been doing this entire time, to a small batch facility in New York City. And first, congratulations. And two, what does this mean for you and your brand moving forward?
This is very exciting because when I first started it, medically accessible adaptive wear is a white space. There are products out there, but they don't answer the needs of all kinds of situations. They kind of are just like a band-aid for one situation. So I have been hand sewing everything made to order because I wanted to test the market, see what people respond to, and be able to kind of pivot as I needed to. And now that I've been doing that for a few years, I'm ready to do some small batch production. I do like to make things in America, at least for now, while I have control over the situation. But if you buy my garments in the next 3 to 4 months, I'll be making them. So you'll own a little piece of history.
Yeah.
And I'm a super crazy perfectionist. So they're really nicely made. But the new products, I've been finding some gorgeous fabrics. I know that super soft, lovely fabrics are the most important thing for people. So
Mhm.
that is my focus. Some new colors, and yeah, I'm so excited about it.
You should be. I'm excited to kind of see where this goes to. And another exciting thing that you shared with me is kind of a brand evolution that's taking place. And do you want to share a little bit more about that with the audience as well?
Yes. So Krysalis Kourture is the initial adaptive wear brand. And because I'm an artist, of course, I chose a name that no one can spell remember or say or understand. So kind of like now I understand it's like SEOs, keywords, rebranding, all of that. So that's funny, but like I've learned my entrepreneurial lesson. So Krysalis Kourture will be presenting Luxe Care. So Luxe Care isn't just the new garments made in factories, but also it's focusing more on gifting, because when your loved one is going through treatment, when they're first diagnosed, you feel completely helpless and you want to be able to, you can get them food, you can help them with rides. There's all kinds of lovely things you can do, but a lot of products that are out there are throwaway kind of products. Plus, if you don't know what they're allergic to or how their dietary plans are, I mean, I got plants that I killed. I got things I couldn't eat, right? So I wanted to be able to make a platform where people can go and buy a gift that was useful and meaningful and could fill that gap when maybe they don't know what to say. I actually just read this article that meant a lot to me that talked about how people lose friends during treatment
Right.
because they don't know what to say, or
Mhm.
they said the wrong thing, or they just grow apart because of the awkwardness or how it's triggering to them because of their own experiences.
Mhm.
Why can't I make a platform that keeps people together? I lost friends, and losing friends during treatment actually was more traumatic than going through the treatment,
Mm.
honestly.
Wow.
So that's what Luxe Care is, a luxurious way to show you care. And
So
I'm very
exciting.
excited about it. Yeah, it'll be very giftable.
That's great, and people can look forward to that. I believe you said in early 2025.
Yes.
That's so exciting, and we'll be sure to help promote and kind of spread that message when that does launch so that listeners who are kind of just waiting in the wings for a solution like this know where to go. Because I know this is a huge problem, and it's something that even people who are really close to in your life, they're like, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? And in fear of saying or doing something wrong, they just don't do anything. So this is such a great solution to really, like you said, bridge the gap when words aren't enough. Like when you don't know what to say and you don't know what to do. It's kind of a curated solution for you. So I'm so excited to see how this transition goes and your brand evolution. And Paloma, I know people listening are going to want to connect with you right now and learn more about how they can purchase from you, or maybe just connect and hear more about your story. So, where can listeners find you if they want to connect and continue the conversation?
I have my website, chrysaliskouture.com, and I'm Krysalis Kourture on Instagram, Facebook, and you can email me if you have any questions. I am going to be offering a concierge service. But if you want to do it ahead of time, if you don't know what garment you want to pick, or if you want to have help styling your headscarves, because all of our headscarves are stylable. When I lost my hair, I missed having something to play with. So that was kind of my idea when I was making those. I'm here. I'm here to help, and I am doing this full time. So please reach out. I'd be more than happy to walk you through my products.
We'll put your information in the show notes so people can connect with you super easily. But Paloma, thank you so much for your time. I am so excited to see where the future of your brand goes and all of the good work that you're going to continue doing. So thank you so much for your time. And you have huge cheerleaders in us, supporting you and hoping that you succeed.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And likewise.